My question really is, if now we pick and choose an outcome and an output randomly, what evidence do we need to provide, if any, that we've done some partnership analysis to make sure that the other output areas or outcome areas under the theory of change are actually addressed? Yeah. What will we need to provide, or what do we need to do? Because otherwise we run the risk of having, tackling one area, but not the full picture, having the full picture, which I guess is the idea behind the theory of change.
Okay, thanks for the question. I mean, the idea of the theory of change and the flagship is indeed that it needs to actually begin with the consultation with other stakeholders, and the selection of the outcomes and outputs that are relevant within a country context are indeed not random, but based on a consultation with stakeholders and based on your own analysis of where a country stands within the overall theory of change. Hence, as you know from the timeline that has been put on the intranet, the current phase that we're in is this consultation and socialization of the flagships with our partners, government, donors, civil society, and UN agencies. And the idea here is for us to be able to identify where a country stands in terms of the overall theory of change. I mean, as you look at the outcomes, you'll see that at least at the outcome level, in most of them, there's a general causality going from outcome 1, moving to outcome 2, 3, and in some cases 4. So in some countries, you may find that the first outcome in terms of the legislative and policy framework is already in place. And so this country may need to focus on outcome 2 and 3. In others, you may find that legislative environment is not in place, and we actually need to begin there. And then it will be about figuring out which other partners are possibly working in this area already. So indeed, this consultation is very important. In fact, it's critical. And in order for a country to be able to identify and localize the theory of change to their context, there will need to be this consultation with other partners. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does answer the question. I think in theory that works, but I'm wondering in practice, in terms of the timelines, if people will actually have done it in the way that it should be done. But that's just an assumption I have, or a question.
I would also assume that the countries, when the reps express their interest at the sorry,
I think somebody needs to mute the microphone.
Yes. Yeah. I believe when the country reps indicated their interest, a lot of it was also based on ongoing work. So, for most of the flagships, this is not areas that we are starting from scratch in. So for countries that have been working, for example, against violence against women, you probably already have a very good idea of where a country stands. You already know who the partners are. So so we're not, for most of them, most countries will not be starting these consultations in a vacuum. They already have been working on these issues. They probably already have a pretty good idea of where the country stands and who the partners are and what they are doing.
Sure, yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Okay. It's clear.
Other questions?
Hello?
Oh, hello. Go ahead. You have a question? Go ahead.
Nigeria. Yes, I'm IG from Nigeria. In fact, unfortunately, our office was not represented during the global meeting. So my question is related to the integration of flagship in our annual work plan. Because we don't really know what is the criteria of selection. Can we only decide to choose a flagship if we already have resources to implement? Because at this stage, we are working on our work plan, or can we also decide to be part of a brand new flagship and decided to raise funds for it? Will it mean that we cannot have activities under this flagship this year until we raise funds. Because, it's not clear to us what kind of decision has been taken. Because we are being asked to choose the flagship we want to be involved in, but we don't know the criteria to identify them.
Sure. No, that's a very fair question. And in fact, if I'm looking at the presentation that Yannick gave when he was at the retreat in Eka, and one of his slides were selection criteria. So we are preparing an extended PowerPoint presentation that pulls together all the different presentations that have been prepared from about May until now into one PowerPoint, and this is particularly for the country officers and country presence who are not at the global retreat. So this is particularly will be particularly helpful for them. And we hope to have that out by the end of this week and available on the intranet. Just to answer your question quickly, in terms of the selection criteria, the main ones would be a client demand, so and opportunities at the country level, an impact in terms of women's empowerment and gender equality, being able to leverage the mandate of the organization and act as an integrative device. Scale, that's an important point. So a flagship, we've set a general target for a flagship to be 1 million per country office per year. So, you would need to from your country context, believe that for this particular one, there is the possibility to mobilize 1 million per country, per flagship per year. Another criteria would be either something that we do very well, so we already have a good track record and a proven methodology in doing so, or something where we believe is a strategic area for UN Women's, where we may not be very present, but where we believe it's important and it's a strategic opportunity for us to do so. And here, for example, and we believe there's room for growth. So, for example, humanitarian action or women in peace and security could be one of these areas. And the last criteria is economies of scale, in the sense that we can develop a program around it where we'll be able to have operational activities that can leverage economies of scale. So those are the general selection criteria. And again, for your question about not having been at the retreat and more information, we will have this extended PowerPoint presentation available by the end of the week.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. And
we are looking forward to the PowerPoint presentation.
Is the PowerPoint from ECHA on the SharePoint site?
No, but I'm putting it all together into one.
Okay.
So we'll pull all of these into one. That will also include talking points in the notes, so that colleagues will be able to look at the PowerPoint and read the notes to understand a little bit of the presentation. Because we have the presentation that Yanni did in Arab States, and then it changed a little bit for Bangkok, and then it changed a little bit for Eka. So we're trying to put it all together into one extended PowerPoint, mostly for internal use, and then one abridged version that can be used when country reps are discussing, particularly with our partners.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. So colleagues, that PowerPoint will be coming soon, and it will just put very clearly some of the points Fiona just made in terms of selection criteria. Okay, just looking through some of the comments. Well, firstly, I know that there are a number of colleagues who have struggled to connect. We really didn't anticipate that there would be such a high number of participants at the clinic. We're very happy to put on more clinics later this week or early next week, and we can do one every week as long as there's demand for these clinics. PPGU will continue to put them on. We're also going to make a recording of this, I think, available. So anyone who did want to tune in but couldn't, we would suggest that they also listen to the recording, because they may get an answer to their question very easily just by listening to the recording. So we'll send you the link through the planning and coordination specialists to that recording later today or early tomorrow. Now, I'm just looking through some of the comments, because some of you are also having audio problems. There's a comment from Yara Dair. saying as we're working on the 2016 AWP and trying to link the outputs to the FSP outputs, one of our outputs could be linked to more than one output under the FSP. How shall we deal with that? I think the flagship program outputs are kind of on the higher level in terms of outputs and the higher end of the scale. So I think that's only normal if you're looking to try and do a very meticulous linking of different results across AWPs right over to flagship program initiatives at every level of the results chain. However, that's not actually necessary for you to do that. By all means, if you find the exercise informative, that's fine. But what we're asking you to do in terms of integrating the flagship program initiatives into the strategic notes and the AWPs is obviously to go through that initial process we just discussed of identifying which flagship programs you're going to work on and which dimensions or parts of which flagship programs you're going to work on. But once you have identified that, say for example, you're going to work on the Violence Against Women flagship program, and even if you have a pre-existing program, you're not required to go in and completely redefine all of your results to be a verbatim reflection of the theory of change results. You're not even required by us to go in and do that very meticulous mapping of outcome to outcome and output to output. Colleagues at the retreat in particular urged us to I think, be more flexible, and I think we'd always intended to exercise a lot of flexibility. So really you're supposed to look at the flagship program, see how the theory of change applies to you, see which parts, as we said, have been picked up already elsewhere, or as Fiona said, which outcome areas are relevant or not relevant to your country context. Maybe you're already working on many of these things, that's absolutely fine. Maybe there's one or two additional ones you will pick up. But then you're defining the results and the outputs that are most relevant to the local context, are also ideally aligned with the UNDAF and national priorities, and so on. Because you're taking on a flagship program, of course, you need to indicate in the AWP or the strategic note DRF, just in terms of putting it in parenthesis after the results, that this is a flagship program initiative that you're reflecting. You do need to take on at least one of the output indicators from the theory of change of the flagship program initiative and have that in your DRF of your strategic note or AWP. And in the 1 or 2 page cover note for your AWP, or in the narrative part of your strategic note in the proposed program section, you should also indicate which flagship programs you're going to be taking on in 2016. So there are the 3 ways in which we expect to see it. We're not expecting to see this very, very detailed mapping from one to the other. The reason I think, Yara, you are seeing that is because in developing a theory of change, of course, at that very corporate global level, there's always going to be an element of it's also going to be a little bit generic in the sense that we're trying to identify a very kind of one-size-fits-all theory of change that captures the full spectrum of changes that one may or may not expect to see in many different typologies of countries. Once you go in to try and narrow that down, you will probably have that greater degree of specificity in relation to the outputs than we would ever be able to define globally. So so you will be able to know exactly what the outputs and deliverables that are required in the country are and the specifics of those, so it will naturally seem to be at a lower level than the one in the theory of change. Now, because this is quite a technical question and quite a nitty-gritty question, I suggest you talk to your planning and coordination specialist in the first instance if you haven't already, but you can also contact PPGU and give us the exact example you're talking about, and we can just give you our thoughts on it. That's an option that's open to everybody. Now my colleague Hiba has joined us, and she also has a comment on this question.
Because I know Yara's probably referring to the work on the Oasis in Jordan, which links to the LEAP program, which is built on pretty much on the model there. I think following on Shane's point, because you're working both on the host communities and in the refugee setting, one of the ways you could do that is to pick up indicator of each of the outputs of the flagship program and align those to your output, because your output would actually feed into both of these. So this could be like an easy way where you can align with both of the flagship outputs. I hope that answers your question, Yara, if I got you right on this one.
Okay. You want to add something?
Yeah, no, I just want to add, just since we were discussing we mentioned the indicators, that for colleagues who want to target specific groups, because that has often come up as an issue, for example, migrant workers or disabled, or one way to do this is through the indicators. So we are going to also meet Shane on the indicators and make sure also that these target groups are also reflected. So for countries that want to focus their work on particular target groups, one way to do this is by picking up the indicator of a particular target group.
Okay. So I'm just scrolling through the written questions. I think most people who have commented about technical problems. I think unfortunately blue jeans does have a limit, and we've had problems with blue jeans before. But okay, so we have a question from Hulda Umar, and the question is: on the theories of change for the flagship programs, could you please advise on how and where we should reflect them, i.e. for countries developing new strategic notes? Beyond that, is it correct that there is room to contextualize the flagship program theories of change? And if so, is there an approval process we need to follow when we do? So in terms of in the submission of your strategic notes, we actually had, I think, over the past 2 years, a growing number of offices anyway submitting theories of change with their strategic notes, just as good practice, and usually doing it in annexes. And what we expect in terms of the strategic notes this year, we've made it more specific in the explicit in the guidance. We do expect to see theories of change to capture your proposed work and your proposed program as annexes to the strategic note. And this is regardless of whether or not you're implementing flagship programs or one or more flagship programs. It's just good practice that we need to catch up on for strategic notes to be accompanied by theories of change. So those should be attached as annexes to the narrative. Now, where we have shown some flexibility is we haven't prescribed whether or not you need to do a theory of change for a major pillar of the program, for the overall program, or for particular outcomes from the program. Different agencies practice different things, but as this is the first year where we're requiring it in the strategic notes, we're giving you the flexibility to do it as you wish. Now, I would suggest the common sense approach is if you have, for example, flagship programs, to use or work off those flagship programs' theories of change and contextualize them locally to put them into your strategic note as annexes. Now, in terms of the approval process, the strategic notes, and then as a consequence, of course, the theories of change that go along with them, will be reviewed in headquarters as usual in early November. And there'll be the peer review group meetings, as they have always taken place in headquarters, for the small number of strategic notes we have this year. And at that point, we'll be able to review and provide feedback, and maybe even help you improve those theories of change as we move forward. One last point, also in the narrative section of your proposed program, in the proposed program part of the narrative section of your strategic note, where you describe your program, what you're proposing to do over the next 4 to 5 years, that should also sort of speak to or mirror the logic of the theories of change that you're attaching as annexes to the plan. So if that's not clear, again, feel free to contact us, and I'll put that in writing for you as well. Okay, so we have Elizabeth has a question, a follow-up question regarding the amount to be raised by flagship programs. Okay, so Elizabeth, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hi. Yes, thank you. Just wanted to check the 1 million figure is for when a country office decides to take on the entire flagship, or just as soon as they decide to take on one of the outcomes, it's the 1 million figure?
Yeah, the general target is when you decide to take on an outcome, it's the 1 million. And the reason, again, is because we want to move away from a large number of small projects to a small number of large programs. Because that's where we can tap into the economies of scale. So yeah, the 1 million is when you go for a flagship outcome. I mean, one of the things that we were discussing in a meeting that we had last week, that a possibility is also to look at reprogramming or going to donors for which you have existing resources under, for example, in violence against women, perhaps you have a large number of small contributions, and one way to do this would also be to go to see the donors with the overall flagship and a larger program, and discuss the possibility of them reprogramming their money into the larger program as part of a larger transformative change process, if that makes sense.
And just to be clear, I think it's not necessarily 1 million per outcome.
No, it's 1 million per flagship.
I think the bottom line on this one, maybe if I put it, and Fiona, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have had a number of kind of emails where the question that people seem to be kind of skirting around but getting to is, at what point does what I'm doing become a flagship program? So what is the kind of what are the criteria that one applies to saying we are implementing a flagship program in my country? And one of those criteria is, if you're saying you're implementing a flagship program, you should have a budget of $1 million per year for that flagship program. Doesn't matter if it's one outcome, doesn't matter if it's like 10 outcomes. It's only a flagship program essentially. It's only capturing the spirit of the flagship programs in terms of scale and ensuring economies of scale, in terms of really ensuring that kind of scale of impact and transformative change and all those things. If you have about $1 million altogether for the year. Now, in the context of AWPs and strategic notes, moving forward for 2016, that you can have that will show up in 3 ways in the annual work plan. Firstly, you can use a small amount of core, of course, as seed funds for some particularly of these new flagship program initiatives, where you're maybe going to need to show that also the organisation is committed to moving into this area in order to help attract donor resources. So there could be some core in there making up that $1 million. There could also, as Fiona said, some of you may want to either, if not this year, early next year, explore the possibility of renegotiating some cost-sharing agreements and some projects with donors to try and have some of our many small projects folded into a bigger flagship program initiative. So if you have, for example, 6 or 7 little initiatives or programs on violence against women, you may be able to look into the possibility, and we would also try to help you with this, of folding those 6 or 7 small ones into one big new flagship program initiative on violence against women, with revised cost-sharing agreements, of course, for each of the donors on those. So that's the second source of budget that may show up comprising that $1 million. And then the third is, of course, new resources to be mobilised, which is one of the main points of the flagship program initiative, to help us as an organisation step up non-core resource mobilisation in particular. So this we would expect to also see as a significant component of that $1 million that you have you're going to try and budget for 2016.
Can I add that? Just adding to Shane's last point, I think what we would not want to see corporately at the end of the day is re-engineering, where we're just showing what we have to be aligned with flagships and job is well and done. The whole point of the flagships, beside the fact that we really want to reach that transformative change, is that we also want to drive growth in the organization and its resources. So it's a tool for the country offices as they're planning for their strategic notes in the coming period, to pick up these tools and to drive that kind of growth. So the idea of why $1 million per year, and we would really like to see that we are moving towards multi-year, for example, a 5-year framework where we have programs of $5 million per country, is to see that kind of growth in the country offices and that predictability around programming when going to a donor with a solid theory of change. So I think we want to balance in a way how we align what we already do to the flagships with how we are genuinely picking up the flagship to drive growth at the country level with new initiative, or scaling up, or leveraging what we have as catalytic funding for broader resource mobilization around the flagships.
Okay, thank you, Hiba. And just, of course, a reminder to everyone that although there have been some changes to particularly the PRG process in relation to annual work plans, and this year it's going to happen at the regional level, there is clearly an expectation that the regional directors, but also at a peer level representatives, will be, when they're discussing their proposed programs for 2016 and beyond, that you will be sort of pushing each other and testing each other in the extent to which these things really represent flagship programs. So that it's not that it's not going to be. I think if somebody is trying to portray something as a flagship program when it isn't, I would expect that to be challenged, and hope that would be challenged in the review process. And also bear in mind that Yannick, the ASG, is going to be attending those review meetings and looking at these AWPs and your flagship programs for 2 of the regions that we have. Maria Noel will be going to 2, and Dan will be going to 2. The program advisors for each region will be going to each of them, and PPG will be attending most. So I think just bear in mind that as you're preparing these strategic notes and AWPs, that part of the discussion and the review process among your peers, but also with some colleagues from headquarters, will be around just these questions of explain how you contextualize or how your program as a flagship program here in your proposed AWP, how does it reflect the broader flagship program initiative? How did you get from the flagship program brief and the flagship program theory of change to what you have here? And of course it's not it is just a review exercise, but I would urge you just to take quite seriously the idea of integrating the flagship program initiatives. If you're saying you're going to be doing a flagship program, it's important that you really are taking it on in spirit as well as in form, and that you're able to address that in the review process.
Can I just add one point on the resource mobilization? To add that the focal points on the flagships are now turning their attention from the narrative of the background, which we have in the brief, to really fleshing out the implementation arrangements. And so by the end of September, early October, we will have also a much clearer idea of what are the implementation arrangements per flagship, and that will also help in terms of the resource mobilization and financing strategy. So, for example, for WPS and for the humanitarian recovery, we know that there will be a global acceleration instrument that will be established, and that UN Women country officers working in this area would be able to tap into new resources mobilized through this new financing instrument. For most of them, it's likely to be a portfolio of country projects supported by global technical projects, where most of the resource mobilization will need to be done at country level, which is very much in line with development cooperation that is decentralized in most cases to the country level. In addition, we will here be liaising more closely with SPD, and for each of the flagships, we will be discussing with them to have a list. With the Strategic Partnership Division, the Resource Mobilization Division. So for each of the flagships, we will try to come with who are the potential donors for which this flagship is a strategic priority. So that will also help you at country level to identify which donors you may wish to approach.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. So just moving again through the questions, I see one from Leslie Reader saying, can we request another clinic? So I think, yes, it's obvious we're going to, I think, have another clinic next week. I was almost suspecting we would have been finished by 8:15 and have very few countries, but it seems I've completely misjudged that. So we'll probably be doing a series of these clinics given the clear demand. So question from Fumi, can you please also send us a document that summarises all the HQ responses to all the questions received so far from the field, in addition to the updated presentation?
Yes, can I urge everybody to look online on the intranet? We actually have a 25-page, maybe even more FAQ that is already uploaded, and to which we will add the questions that come out of each of the clinics. But in terms of the components of the flagship, the timelines of the flagship, a range of questions, these are already available on the internet. I would also urge you to look at the climate resilient agriculture page as an example of one that is moving ahead quite quickly, in the sense that we already have a concept note. We will soon have a PowerPoint presentation for countries to be able to use in their communication efforts with donors and other partners. And certainly after every clinic, we will update the FAQs with the questions that have come up from the clinic, and these will be available through the intranet.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. So a question from Petra in Nairobi. The question is, in aligning the AWPs to flagship programs, are we only replacing results or indicators that were already covered in the original strategic note to which the AWP has to align? Or do we also add new flagship program results that were not included in the original strategic note? So the answer to this is yes, and I'll explain why. It's sort of yes, ... So what we want, let's look at it this way. What we really want is we want people to integrate flagship programs into their strategic notes and AWPs, but we have to make sure, of course, that all the results and indicators that are in those revised flagship strategic notes and AWPs make sense to you and that they're still relevant to the programming in the local context. So when you decide you're taking on a flagship program, let's take, for example, once again, the idea of the Violence Against Women flagship program, that main flagship program. When you look at the theory of change, if you want to revise your program based on the theory of change, integrate a lot of the flagship program initiative thinking, and if some of the results in the theory of change for that flagship program make sense to you or make more sense than the ones you have already, then you can take them on if you like. There's nothing to stop you taking on those exact results or indicators. However, if you want to contextualize them, localize them, make them more relevant to the local context, you have to do that. You know, you shouldn't be trying to take things on verbatim just that were produced by headquarters. The very minimum you have to do is you have to take on one of the outcome indicators, because we need to be able to aggregate what's happening in terms of the flagship programs, what they're achieving and what sort of impact they're having. So we need everybody to take on some of the outcome indicators from the flagship program initiatives. But you don't have to take on any results verbatim, but you can if you want to. Now, in terms of your question, do you add the flagship program results or do you replace what you have in your strategic note? You can replace what you have in your strategic note with flagship program stuff, or you can add the flagship program stuff. That's not really, I think the core question for us is, you're designing the program in the first instance. The first question is, having looked at what you are already doing in that portfolio, if you're doing anything, having looked at the flagship program initiative that we have, the theory of change and the sort of menu of services that we're intending to provide corporately in that area, what do you as an office want to do that you think you can do moving into 2016 that will bring in around $1 million, where we can put about $1 million a year, and where you think we can have real impact? Basically the selection criteria Fiona talked about. But once you've figured out then, well, within my country, looking at this flagship program initiative and this theory of change, looking at the strengths of my offices and what other people are doing here and all that, here's what I think we should be doing in my country. Once you look through that, then you should know, okay, this means I'm going to have to replace some of my strategic note results. Or, when you've done that, it may say, this means I have to just add some flagship program results to my strategic note results. It's really about what you see once you start to think about the applicability of the flagship program initiative to your country context. Now, it's obviously the question is, I know it's pretty not hypothetical because you're probably dealing with very precise examples of this. Again, please feel free to contact through PPGU. If PPGU can't resolve it, we can talk to the people who are working as focal points on the flagship program initiative. But we will try to get you an answer if you have a specific question with specific results on a specific flagship program initiative. So if you really have a very wicked technical problem, don't suffer in silence. Just email us and we'll try to get an answer for you within a day or two. Okay.
Shane, I think you skipped over one of our colleagues from Georgia had a question.
Aha, I skipped Georgia, okay.
Just,
oh, this one, is it?
no, just above.
Tanzania.
That one, yeah.
Okay.
Karen.
So Karen.
Okay. Okay, so a question from Karen Goranson. She says, I also have a question on integration of FPIs into the strategic note. Is it okay to combine pieces of two different FPIs on, for example, women's economic empowerment in our women's economic empowerment DRF? Thank you in advance. Well, when you say combine, I mean, obviously we see we would expect a number of offices would be implementing more than one flagship program initiative. Now, if, for example, in the case of economic empowerment, there are two flagship program initiatives that you looked at, and you think, okay, we're going to work on one outcome on this one and one outcome on this one. I think we would see that as two, in order to be a flagship program initiative, it's two different flagship program initiatives. We're going to have to stick with these categories because we're kind of organizing support and the intellectual products the organization is going to be developing over the next few years around those as categories. So you'd be expected to stick with those. Now, what that may mean also then is if when you look and you say, well, there's no way I can get the two of those $2 million each, like maybe that one's worth $200,000 here, that one I could get $300,000 for here, you can still go ahead and work on those things. It won't be a flagship program initiative though unless it's $1 million, but you could still maybe start like that and maybe try to increase it over subsequent years. Again, I know that you're not asking that as a totally hypothetical question. You clearly have two different flagship program initiatives that you're looking at. So if you want to get even more exact kind of advice on it, again, we're all just kind of sitting here ready to help. And there are focal points in headquarters on each of the flagship program initiatives that can also help. So Karen, if you want more advice on that, please let us know. Any colleagues want to chip in? I don't want to hog the... Okay, so we have also a question now from Leslie in Tanzania. Leslie says, from Tanzania, our main issue is that as a delivering as one country, we've just gone through an extensive consultation process with government and stakeholders, and we recently signed the UNDAP 2 for 2016-2021. So we need guidance on how to apply flagships within this context. How flexible can we be for delivering as one country and still benefit from the flagships as far as resource mobilisation and advisory policy support, given that it will be difficult to sell them as flagships per se in an UNDAP country. The other is to request that we don't add an additional level of reporting, as we already report for UN Women, UNDAP, and as per donor agreements. Okay, thanks Tanzania. I think we are alert to the particular challenges of delivering as one, particularly countries like Tanzania who take it so seriously and actually really try to do delivering as one. So we understand the situation that you're in. I'll do your last question first, if that's all right, and then maybe I'll ask Fiona to talk about the flagship program part and how to socialise that in interagency context. But on the reporting part, no, we're not intending, as far as I know, for any kind of separate reporting on flagship programs. What we're going to try and do is, in the results management system, we will be able to identify what are flagship program initiatives and what are just the normal development work that we're doing that are not flagship program initiatives. And we're going to try to use the results management system so that you will just report on what you're doing like you always do. So it'll just be that still reporting to UN Women that you noted there in your last sentence. And then it's at this end that we would probably try to pull out the flagship program initiatives part. Now that's what we're intending. I can't say for sure whether there may be a possibility at some stage that there may be an extra question or two that we may ask if we're trying to figure out some particular diagnostic issue in relation to flagship programs or implementation arrangements or something. There may be some additional intelligence we'll be looking for. But generally, rest assured, we're not intending people to have a situation where they have to draft entirely separate kind of flagship program reports that are completely different from corporate reporting and completely different from donor reporting. We're going to try and make it so that in actual fact, what we're trying to do is, more broadly speaking, through the economies of scale that Fiona was talking about, through rationalising and really focusing our programme work, we're trying in the longer term, probably in about 2 years, we're hoping to actually see a real rationalisation and streamlining of reporting and monitoring of these things, because we're hoping people will have fewer results and bigger programmes and projects. So trust us, we also live in that world, so we're also trying to make life easier for us as well as for you. So as I say, I don't know if that answers your question. I'll pass on to Fiona now on the delivering as one thing.
On the delivering as one, I mean, certainly I think here you would need to look at the UNDAF and see which of the flagships respond to the UNDAF, because certainly, having gone through that whole process, it's not about going to the government and saying, in addition to the UNDAF we have these, but rather looking at the UNDAF and seeing which of the flagships could help to provide an additional way forward in order to achieve some of those outcomes that are in the UNDAF. So, for example, if one of the outcomes in the UNDAF is on agriculture, the theory of change on women's empowerment in agriculture could actually be a concrete way forward to achieve the outcomes that are already in the UNDAF. So again, I think it will be about looking at the outcomes in the UNDAF, seeing which of the flagships could help provide a way forward, and then perhaps meeting with the specific, how are they called now? The specific groups, working groups under each of the outcomes with the theory of change, and seeing how this could provide a way forward for that group to achieve the outcomes within the UNDAF.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. So, colleagues, as we're trying to answer your questions, if you find our answers unsatisfactory, you can just type in at the bottom. So, if what I said about reporting, if it doesn't sound convincing, this is the place for you to tell us that it doesn't sound convincing. So, moving on, then we had Yara dear, we answered that question. Fumi, we answered your question on the FAQs. Petra, I think we tried to answer your question. So we have a question from Anna Mutavati. Anna says, our understanding is that we're not formulating new flagship programs per se at country office level, but integrating the theory of change for selected flagship programs into the country program. I think, I mean, that's...
Yes and no.
Yeah, I think I was going to say it's a yes and no question. So obviously you have the... let's look at like two different examples maybe, and colleagues chip in as well. If you take something like violence against women, it's highly unlikely, if you're already working on violence against women, and maybe you're already spending $1 million a year on violence against women, it's highly unlikely you look at the flagship program theory of change and said, wow, this stuff is all new, we've never done any of this stuff before. It's captured an awful lot of what we have been doing anyway. It's also been developed by our violence against women staff, who have been the one who's also been advising the field and advising us corporately for the last few years. It's not a revolution in terms of the programming strategy, it's a revolution in terms of having a very explicit theory of change. So the likelihood is, if you look at that, you'll see, yeah, we're already doing a lot of the stuff that's in that FPI TOC. There may be some things that you're not. So in that case, in the case of a situation like that, what you may simply be doing is saying, okay, I'm going to kind of frame what we're already doing on violence against women within the context of this flagship program initiative. I'm going to make sure when I go to the peer review group meeting in November and December that I'm able to explain how I looked at the theory of change and how it applied to my country and how that has then been reflected in the results that we're taking moving forward. I'm going to take the core resources I'm already spending, and I'm going to maybe try and renegotiate with one or two donors about having a bigger flagship program initiative, whatever you decide to do. And I'm going to try and add some resources. That's one example. So that's where you really are talking more about looking at the flagship program and having that in one hand, and what you maybe already have programming commitments for, you're already planning to do or doing already in the other. That's one example. So that would be the kind of one you're talking about. Now, if you're looking at something like the agriculture flagship program, or one of the more innovative and rather new flagship program initiatives, then in that case you probably are talking about doing something quite new. Now, the whole idea of the FPIs and the TOCs is that you're not starting from scratch. We think at headquarters we have provided you with that platform, that kind of intellectual basis upon which you can now go in and relatively easily you can start to tailor that corporate theory of change to reflect your local circumstances. So in that sense, we've given you a lot of the work to get started on, but it is essentially a new programming exercise for you at the country level, because you're looking and saying, okay, I'm interested in this agriculture flagship program initiative. Looking at it, I can see that, as Fiona was saying earlier, using a different example, outcome one isn't relevant here because the whole legislative and policy basis is already there. But outcome two, which is about access, that's the real issue for women here. So is 3, which is on skills and capacity. So they're the two I'm going to focus on, and I need to rewrite these outcomes and these outputs a little bit, and I know I can actually have a better indicator here because there's that national survey and so on. And in that sense, for the flagship program on agriculture, if you're doing that, you may be essentially going through a new programming exercise, albeit with the support of the corporate process we've gone through. Maybe other colleagues want to...
I would just add that on the intranet, per flagship page, we are updating it, and we will also be including the contact information of the focal points. Both, there's a focal point at headquarters, there's also a focal point in a region or in a country, and I would suggest you should feel free to contact them if you are trying to figure out for perhaps one of the newer, more innovative ones, how you could contextualize that, or if you have questions on making that more relevant to your local context.
Maybe just to add, because reading your question, I'm understanding it in a different way. I think there is an expectation from what we hear from senior management that at the country level, that offices will take these flagships, develop a country level branded project that aligns with the flagship, and go out there and mobilize resources in order to drive the growth and to meet the very big resource mobilization targets that we are increasing. We have increased this year, but will actually increase further next year. So while the safe and fast way to align a strategic note and annual work plan is to see how we have what we are doing currently in violence against women and align that with the flagship, I think the opportunity is to take the flagship and to see how we can build on the work that we are doing in a more comprehensive manner, and take that work and take that that theory of change that articulates well our strategy of how we can reach that transformative change, and move forward with new programs and create that hard pipeline and move with resource mobilization. So I think there is that expectation that, yes, we are expecting country offices to take the flagships and see how they can develop and build on their existing work with additional programming, not necessarily in new areas if they don't want to go to new areas, but really scaling up and taking their current work to scale, leveraging the flagship programs in their programming in the coming planning cycle.
Fiona, did you want to?
No, I think that's right. Thanks, Hiba, for that. As I said, most of the implementation arrangements will be through a portfolio of country projects. And while it's not a requirement per se, I believe most donors will require a project document to put in additional resources into a particular area. There are donors, and there may be more donors that are willing to put in money at the strategic note level, in which case a specific project document may not be required. But I think in most cases, particularly at the beginning, it will be about once you've identified the flagships that you are integrating into your strategic note, the next step very quickly will become about drafting a country project document in that area with the budget of around 1 million per year, using the theory of change as the flagship that has been contextualized, and you would basically need to use that as your resource mobilization tool to get to the 1 million per year. So indeed that will very quickly become the next step.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Just to be maybe to be as explicit as we can, because I've been asked this question a number of times. So if I can just try to capture what Eva and Fiona have been saying, and then maybe you can tell me if I misunderstood. So it's not mandatory for you to have a separate project document in order to implement a theory of change. However, the expectation is that it's likely you will have to do that in order to get non-core resources and take you to 1 million or more per annum. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you think that you're going to be able to implement the flagship program through mobilizing resources directly off a revised strategic note, then you can try to do that. However, we think that in many cases donors will look for a project. I think that's been the experience of many of you anyway when you look for non-core, that although there are some now prepared to commit directly to strategic notes, there are others who insist on a separate project document. Okay, so I have a question here from Amna. Can you please give an example on how the strategic note narrative should mirror the FPIs? Well, we are intending to have an example very shortly, because Moldova had volunteered to be the canary in the mine and move ahead and develop their revised strategic note with full incorporation of the flagship program initiative. So very soon, later this week or early next week, we would hope to be able to show you an example. Certainly for my part, what I expect when I read a strategic note and the strategic note narrative is, at the very minimum, in the section of that narrative called Proposed Program, I would anticipate that the office would be very explicit and say that in terms of its proposed program moving forward, the office is intending to implement the UN Women Flagship program on whatever it might be, and explain then how it has used the theory of change and revised or contextualized the theory of change to develop the local flagship program initiative. It's really just, I think, the secret is to keep it simple, keep it clear, but be quite explicit and mention flagship programs in your proposed program if you're taking them on. Again, we should have an actual example to show you shortly. Okay, so we also have a question from Elizabeth. Elizabeth says, I also had a clarifying question regarding theories of change and strategic notes. Is it just one theory of change or several theories of change based on flagship programs selected by the country office? Well, this was deliberately left quite flexible this year. I'll tell you why. Firstly, because we introduced it this year as being mandatory that there would be some theories of change or a theory of change reflected and attached as an annex to the strategic note. So it's at the discretion of primarily the regional office to determine what it expects to see in reviewing the AWPs in particular. Of course, I think the logical thing for anyone to do, the sensible thing to do, is if you're going to be implementing 2 or 3 flagship programs, would be to attach the localized version of the theory of change for those flagship programs to the as an annex to the strategic note. The reason we weren't too explicit is because if we say to people you do it for each outcome, that's not quite the same as a flagship program. A flagship program can be more than one outcome. We didn't want just one theory of change for the overall program, because although in some cases that might be possible for some of our smaller offices, they might want to do that, but for the bigger programs that of course simply doesn't work. So we want to just give people the flexibility to see, well, how do you think of your program? How many theories of change do you actually have in terms of how you're understanding how your program works? And again, Elizabeth, if there's a specific country and you want to just email us and say this country is proposing to do it this way, feel free to contact us here in PPGU and we'll let you know what we think about that specific case. Okay, we have a question from Fumi. Fumi says, we understand that at minimum each office needs to select one flagship program outcome indicator, not a flagship program output indicator. Does this mean that in the RMS we'll be aggregating data on flagship program results only at the outcome level only, because some offices will not be using flagship program output indicators? That is correct, at least for the first year or two. We're looking at just using the outcome level indicators from the flagship program initiatives, because what we're really interested in at the aggregate corporate and global level is trying to capture the outcome level change. Like what is actually the impact, what are the results, the really meaningful things that are happening outside of the context of these flagship programs. So we're not focused on the output level at present, and we wanted to reduce the work burden for you and keep it flexible and sensible. It may be moving forward at some stage there will be more output level indicators, particularly with the new strategic plan, as we align the flagship program initiatives and the new strategic plan together. But because we're conscious of the fact that we have your strategic note indicators, we have flagship program indicators, and we have strategic plan indicators, we wanted to keep it as lean and as easy as possible for you over the next 2 years. Okay, so anyone else want to? Okay, can we please have the name of the persons we can send emails to related to the flagships? That's a question from Ajaratu Fatu and Dae.
So for general questions, that would be me, Fiona. For specific flagships, as I said, we will be putting up the contact information of the focal points. So on more of the substance and soon the implementation arrangements for particular flagships, please feel free to contact the focal points. But I'm happy to answer any general questions, or if you're not sure who to contact, I can certainly put you in touch with relevant colleagues.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. So I have a follow-up question here from Karen Goranson. Karen says, as I understand it, we're encouraged to integrate FPI results, that's outputs and indicators, in the strategic note, even if we're not pursuing a flagship program initiative, as these are quality assured and approved. So in light of this, I will rephrase my previous question. Can we combine results from 2 different flagship programs, in other words, in our Women's Economic Empowerment DRF, though it would not represent a flagship program initiative, if that makes sense for our planned programming in that area? I mean, the answer is yes. If you think that, if you look at some theories of change on a number of flagship program initiatives, and even if you're not intending on implementing those flagship program initiatives, I mean, I'm not saying that you're taking on the full flagship program initiative, if you think that the logic in those theories of change, or in parts of those theories of change, is so strong and compelling and so relevant to your local context that you can take them on, then by all means, if that's the right fit for you, technically there's no reason why you can't do that. And I think you understand this looking at how you phrased your question. But just to reiterate that if you do that, yes, it's nice. You'll have some results that kind of mirror some corporate thinking, and that's gone through all this quality assurance process. But it doesn't mean that you'll be implementing a flagship program. It will just be meaning that you put some results and indicators into your note. Okay, so that I think has me to the end of the list of written questions. Unless I have forgotten some.
No,
so
there's one more.
Oh, there's one more. Okay, so Fumi. Okay, the question from Fumi in Istanbul. whenever you have done some major update in the flagship program pages in the UN Women intranet, is there any way to get a notification by email, for instance? I understand that, of course, it's each staff member's responsibility to check the update in the intranet by ourselves, but it would be very helpful if headquarters colleagues could just notify us by a short email of what major updates were done in the internet for the flagship programs.
For me, to date, every time there's been a major update, Yannick has sent an email to all UN Women staff. So every time we uploaded the theories of change, when we uploaded the Gantt chart, and the list of potential sources, he had sent an email. When the briefs were uploaded, he sent an email. And certainly we are planning on sending an email. He will be himself sending an email to all UN Women staff as a follow-up to the retreat. And on this update, we will have the presentations that I mentioned, both an extended and an abridged. We will certainly indicate that we have updated the FAQs. And there may be one or two other things that don't immediately jump to mind. But certainly this has been the practice so far. And moving forward, certainly, absolutely, I will be sure that there is an email notification that goes out whenever there is a major update to the intranet. I think maybe on the FAQs, we may want to just say that at the end of a clinic, so at the end of that week, we will have updated the FAQs based on the clinics. That may be just a standing practice for over the next month or two. But certainly any big other additional updates, we will continue the practice of sending out a notification email.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. So I'm not seeing any more questions. Maybe I'll just, in case I skipped one or something, this is, I guess, then we're going to close up soon. So if you have one last burning question, think about it now and type it in. I'll just see, do any of the colleagues here want to add anything before we close up? I think this has been this has been very helpful. It was a bit weird at the beginning with some of the technical issues and the strange noises we were hearing. I don't know if you were hearing them as well, but I think we have really learned some of the issues that obviously you're thinking about, and it's impossible for us really to anticipate all of the issues that will come up for you when you actually start to try and do some of this work. So it's been very helpful, and I know that the FAQs will also reflect a lot of these questions that you have raised. A recording of the this session will be put online. So what we're going to probably do is send to the planning and coordination specialists, and maybe also put on Yammer details of the recording for colleagues who either for time reasons like Papua New Guinea and Fiji, or for reasons of connectivity or maximum capacity weren't able to join us. However, we're going to have another clinic soon, probably early next week or this time next week, and we'll be in touch with the dates on that. You don't have to wait for the clinic though. You can of course get in touch with your planning and coordination specialist at the regional office, who should in the first instance be the person you contact, because there are an awful lot of questions that they will be very easily able to help you with. But you can also contact headquarters. You can contact PPGU, your regional program advisor, or Fiona, or if you know the contact person for a particular flagship program initiative, you can contact them, or we can get you their details. So we're trying to give you as much support as we can over the next few weeks as we move towards reviewing these documents in November. So there's no more questions before we close. Donna from DMA would like to say something. Go ahead, Donna.
Hello, colleagues. Donna Grimwade here, Chief of Accounts. So I just wanted to raise with you one item that is associated with the introduction of the flagship programs, and that is that we are trying to move the donor reporting to a pooled funded donor report. So the flagships, we're actually trying to get an economy of scale here as well. So this is really where the reporting that will go to the donors will show the individual revenue coming in from each of the donors to your flagship, but the expenditure will not be by donor. The expenditure will be a consolidated expenditure. We currently prepare these types of pooled funded donor reports for our 2 trust funds. And we also have the situation in Nairobi where they have a basket fund, and it works very effectively. So the pros for the donors are that they see all the other donors contributing to that flagship program, or you can also use this for your strategic note or your annual work plan, and then the expenditure is recorded not using an individual donor code, but just using UN Women's donor code. It also gives you a lot less administration when the budgets are entered into Atlas, because you simply enter them with donor code UN Women rather than specific donor codes for each of the donors who are funding that flagship or strategic note or annual work plan. So we do have good examples out there where this is being used. We know that not all donors will agree to this, but we also know from headquarters here that there will be some high-level discussions with our major donors here, and hopefully that will assist you. So part of the flagships, as you know, is to try and get these economies of scale from the programmatic side, but we're also trying to relieve ourselves and get economies of scale from the administrative side. And so I just wanted to share this with you. If I know it was on the slides that were shared, but we haven't had any discussion or haven't heard anything in today's clinic about that. So I don't know if you have any questions, but okay, they're popping up. Okay, maybe we can have a detailed discussion at the next clinic on this topic, if colleagues need to leave. But I would refer you back to the flagship slides that were issued by Jan.
Those are up on the intranet.
That are on the intranet. Please go there and look at the pooled funded. There's slides on there and how it would work. And perhaps at the next clinic we can have that as one of the topics. Thank you so much.
Fimi has a question.
Okay.
Fimi, would you like to type your question? So just to read out Fumi's question for colleagues who can't see, Fumi wants to know, will this pooled donor report be applied to all of the 3 modalities of flagship programs?
All of the 3 modalities. I mean, in principle, my initial reaction would be yes. So I don't see a reason why not, because the 3 modalities we were talking about was global program, country projects, multi-donor trust fund. So certainly for the multi-donor trust fund, that is already the case. For country projects, it would again depend, as Donna said, on the donor itself. We would certainly encourage, and we are doing that. We will be making an effort, senior management will be making that part of their discussions with the donors for them to pass on to their delegates at the country level, to encourage them to provide resources, high quality, softly earmarked, non-core resources at the thematic level. Some donors will be more likely to do this than others. We've also said that countries should engage in a negotiation and a dialogue with the donors, where maybe initially in the first year they would not be able to provide these resources at such a soft high level, but that they should make this the case moving forward based on performance criteria of a country office. So if a country office is able to achieve the results they set out to achieve, reporting time, then the donor should commit to providing more softly earmarked resources moving forward. So that's for the country project implementation modality, and certainly for the global program modality, again, we will be asking donors to provide their resources to a global program at the flagship level, and leave it, or at the country level if they want to earmark their resources for a particular flagship in a particular country, but then to leave it really to us to be able to see where those resources then go.
Okay, thank you. We have a follow-up question though from Fumi. Fumi asks, how can we ensure the coordination with donors and within UN Women, between headquarters, regional office and field colleagues, to have one harmonised communication with each donor?
that's a good question for me. Yannick, you may have heard him say this. Where he has said that it's not a bad thing for headquarters, regions, and countries to go to the same donors with different flagships and so on. The point is that we need to be coherent, and so that's where the flagship, the theory of change, becomes really important. Where in a sense the theory of change provides us with that harmonized communication approach. In the sense that even if we go at headquarters to a donor here, and if you go to the same donor at the country level, we are talking about the same theory of change. We're talking about the same approach. We're talking about the same actions that we believe need to take place in a particular area. So in a sense, a lot of that harmonization is actually through the theory of change of the flagships. But indeed, as I mentioned, we are now moving forward to talk about implementation arrangements and financing strategies for each particular flagship, and we will have that more detailed for each particular one. And within each flagship, we will specify then at the global level, at the regional level, at the country level, what are the main activities that will be taking place, who are the main partners at the different levels, and where will most of the resource mobilization be done. So I think by probably the end of September, early October, we will also have those in place per flagship, which should also help us approach the donors in a more harmonized manner.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. So I don't see any. Oh, okay, thanks, says Fiona. Great. So I'm not seeing any further questions at present. So I think we will call it a day, or call it a morning in our case, and we'll actually start our day, most of us here in headquarters. Thank you all for calling in. I think it's really heartening that we did get such an impressive turnout at relatively short notice as well. We only sent the link out yesterday, and we had over 30 participants, which I guess would mean in most cases over 30 of our offices, which is very high. We will have further flagship program initiatives. We'll probably use a very similar format. I personally felt it was quite successful. If you didn't like the format or you want us to change something, please also feel free to let us know. As I said, you can get in touch with us bilaterally anytime that you want to in relation to any of these questions for follow-up, or if you want to provide more specific information. We'll certainly try our best to help you, bearing in mind, of course, that this is also a unique process for us as well at headquarters. So, as I say, thank you again. Thank you also to colleagues here in headquarters who made the early trek into work this morning to do this at a time that was reasonable for the field. As I said, we'll do it again next week, and you're free to join us again then. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Okay, good. That was...
Okay.
Yeah, that was...
Yeah.